Hey guys, what's going on? We got a plus 24 Everbloom here, and this time I am playing Elemental Shaman. I know I'm usually enhanced, but due to our team comp, we needed somebody to play ranged, and I was the lucky duck. So, I don't normally play Elemental, I will play it on and off, but I wouldn't say I am a pro at it, but I'd say I did pretty well for a 24. But as you can see, we got some very special affixes for the week that really suck in Everbloom. We got Tyrannical, Afflicted, and Bolstering. So what those means is boss is tougher, we get some ads we have to dispel, and then we also have to deal with mobs getting super gigantic at the end of a pull. Um, but basically, throughout this key, I just want to talk about Elemental and how it felt, and then I guess I'll go over whatever issues we had in the key, as it's a bit higher up, but still a lot of fun. But anyways, to start off with, Elemental is definitely a fun spec. I really enjoyed playing it. I do play it on and off in keys just to get used to it, but this season has been a lot of fun. The fire build is much more fun than the Stormkeeper build, in my opinion. I really didn't like it last season. It felt super clunky, and it wasn't really that enjoyable to play either. But this fire build is it feels really rewarding and visually satisfying, seeing all of the lava bursts go everywhere. So it's definitely a good time. The one thing I would have to mention is flame shock. Um, Getting flame shocks out is really awkward and a pain in the butt. As you can see, you rely on Magma Totem and you rely on Earthquake mixed with Flame Shock, so it does become a bit of a pain in the butt. And if you mess it up, it doesn't feel that great, but when it gets off good, you really do a lot of damage. But as for overall, just like Enhance, you kind of lack the defensive quality, although you do have a shield which can save you. You're still squishy as heck, and it's not all that fun. But with the fact, with how Earthquake works, um, Elemental is very strong in these caster heavy dungeons, because if you don't know how Earthquake works, even though you're watching this, I assume you probably do know, Earthquake has a chance to knock units down. It's a very low chance, but with how much you use it, it's a lot higher than you would think. But yeah, it's really good because it's random interrupts on random casts. So it's very effective in these type of situations where you have these heavy casters or you need to interrupt something that can't be interrupted. Earthquake is really helpful in that sense, and it's really satisfying because in one of the recent patch notes, they actually had to buff Earthquake by 50%, which was needed to increase their overall. But I thought the talent, the Great Sundering, if you don't know what that is, every time you Earth Shock or Elemental Blast, you will cause your next Earthquake to deal increased damage, so you would kind of rotate those two. I don't particularly like that talent, that's why I was kind of crossing my fingers that it wasn't going to happen, and it turns out it really isn't that worth it to take. Although, with the 50% increase to Earthquake, you would think it would, but no, you don't have to worry about that. Its damage alone does compete, and Elemental actually feels really good right now. I haven't quite figured out what's more worth it, but I think just getting Flame Shocks out and Lava Bursting is more worth than sitting there Chain Lightninging. But overall, it honestly feels great. Last season I didn't play Elemental much because I really did not like how it played with that Stormkeeper. It felt super buggy and off. As well, if you made the mistake and overlapped your Stormkeepers, well, you just lost a charge of Stormkeeper, so it feels really dumb that way. But I have to say, with the Storm Conduit talent, basically you would mark a target as a Lightning Rod and they'd take all the nature damage you deal. That's a really cool talent and really good for funnel damage, so if you could get like a giant group and pull them on top of a boss, you could do some massive single target damage. And it was pretty cool. But I'd have to say this build, and it looks like with the season 4 coming up, this will also be the build for it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to changes. Elemental's never really been that amazing at anything in PvE lately. I don't think it's been anywhere near the top of the meters in any patch yet, which is kind of unfortunate, and I'd like to see that change. But it's a lot of fun. My favorite part about Elemental is probably the way the mastery works, the multi-strike. Back in Mists of Pandaria, it was brought in as a stat, and then it just held as their mastery. Although previously they did have a talent for overload in like Wrath and stuff, where you would have a chance to send out a free lightning bolt after casting it, or I think Lava Burst also worked for it. But yeah, it's really nice that they made the mastery, and it actually feels useful now with this build, because you actually want to stack a good chunk of mastery to make sure you're always proccing these Lava Bursts, which give you the Ascendance procs. So you are working with kind of a casino effect, but it's not so needed either. I mean, if you get the Ascendance proc at the right time, you can get some seriously mad damage off, because every time you Lava Burst, you reduce the cooldown of Primordial Wave, and that's a really awesome synergy that I like as well. So it's really fun. The parts I noticed that are really tough is when units start dying with Flame Shock on them, or your Flame Shock just falls off and you can't catch back up type of thing. That feels really bad, although that's probably just a skill issue on my part. Yeah, as you can see, we ran into a bit of a bolster issue here. Everbloom sucks for bolstering, because you get all these dread petals and then they buff the berserker or the caster or the abomination, and they absolutely destroy you. So that's a lot of fun. But anyways, yeah, I would like to see something done about Flame Shock. I mean, the same goes for Enhance too. Like with Elementalist, you are spreading around your Flame Shock a lot, and I'd like to see a better way to get it around. Although making Earthquake and Earthshock with the talent, I'm not sure what it's called, but spread to 2 targets is nice. But it feels like you're relying a lot on your lava totem to get out the flame shocks, which kind of feels bad, but also I don't know. It's really weird. Again, you are soft capped at 6 targets, and then Earthquake does your massive AoE, so it kind of does funnel there. But and there we go again. We die to bolstering stacks. So much fun. But yeah, I would like to see something done about that. I think that is the big point that makes Elemental feel really bad in Mythic Plus, because a lot of your damage, especially right now with this build, relies around Flame Shock being on your target. So I'd like to see something about that done. As for burst situations, Fire Rally is kind of just there, really. With the way this build works, you are constantly resetting it and stuff, because you're spending everything on Lava Burst, and every time you Earth Shock or Earthquake, your next Lava Burst reduces the cooldown of it by, I think, 5 or 7 seconds. So it does feel pretty good, but yeah, I think the big issue is Flame Shock. Even though when you have Fire Rally up, Flame Shock does get an increased duration, but it's only 2 newly applied ones. So maybe if it worked with like already applied ones as well, it would be pretty okay. But I think the main issue is just getting out those Flame Shocks, because you have a cooldown on Flame Shock, which to me feels kind of weird. If they remove the cooldown, then I think Elemental would feel a lot better, especially in those changing of the fights type of thing. So it'd be interesting to see what they could do. But here, this is where elemental really shines, especially in this place, is triple cleave. Honestly, you shine at constant 6 cleave too. Like it goes really really well. But as you can see, we're just taking a lot of damage. This is what it's like on a 24. So you're constantly taking damage and there's not much you can do. And as a shaman, you lack a lot of that defensive quality. That's why you need kind of defensive trinkets and stuff sometimes. So it's really really weird. But yeah, overall, I think Elemental is in a great spot. It needs a slight damage buff just to push it. It would be nice to see Elemental in the S tier ranks for once. In Mythic Plus, it used to be really strong back in BFA because you would do the Storm build, you'd have your Storm Elemental, and its on-use effect would do like this massive AoE funnel type of thing, and it'd do crazy damage. But with the recent changes to the way AoE works and stuff like that, it has a lot of trouble with that type of thing. But yeah, overall I think it's great and I am enjoying learning it as well as doing these high keys as it. It does perform better at the higher levels than the lower levels, just like other ramp classes such as Affliction Warlock and probably Demo Lock as well. It performs much much better at the higher level where things last a lot longer because you have time to ramp up. You're not that front loaded burst like most melee classes. You take time to ramp up, so that is one unfortunate thing, but it is a typical thing with casters, so it does work out in the long run. But for dungeon options for Elemental, I would say Everbloom's, honestly, all of them are pretty good. As long as your tank is pulling at least 6 targets, you're going to be pumping pretty good. If you're pulling less than that, then it might you might see a bit of a drop, especially if they don't last very long. It does suck, but yeah. But here we're coming up to Archmage Soul. No matter what you play, I think this boss sucks. Especially for shamans in general, because you just don't have the defensives to compete with the amount of damage he puts out. So there's no calms in this video, but I am like, okay, I'll wall this one, and then I ask for support on the next one, and so and so. So you have to be in communications with your teammates for your defensives and stuff like that. It's very important. Although I am with a whole group of guildies, it's a bit different when you got a pug. But most people should know by now that shamans are very susceptible to quick burst damage. So, but yeah, as for single target versus AoE, your build doesn't change all that much, which is quite nice, and your rotation doesn't change at all, other than fitting in a couple chain lightnings in AoE versus never using that in single target. It's definitely a very fun spec and visually appealing as well, because you can just see these lava bursts going out, and then when you get that Ascendance proc, you see even more go out, and then basically if you Ascendance proc, you get a Primordial Wave back. So as you can see, it's a lot of fun. You're doing solid damage every time. Your damage is always going to be very consistent rather than inconsistent like some classes that rely on burst AoE, such as I believe Windwalker monks and probably sub-rogues as well, where they could do a pull and they'd be like below the tank, and then their next pull they're doing like 1,000,000 damage type of thing. Your damage is very consistent and fun. The rotation, very interactive. You know, you got shiny buttons, which I like seeing shiny things, and it always makes me want to press them. And then you also have that, oh crap, I got a proc and now I'm gonna pump pretty good. As you can see, I got a proc during a Primordial Wave window, and it's just massive burst damage right there. But yeah, the way the tier set works with it too just makes it feel so good. If you didn't know, the tier set in PTR actually got nerfed by, I believe it was around 50%. It started out as God level and then got nerfed right to the ground. it makes sense based on how much damage you could do now. If you were to increase that by 50%, you'd be past even demon hunters in both AoE and single target, and then especially in like 6 target cleave or triple target cleave, it would be insane. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I would like to see them give it a bit more of a buff just to push it up there. I personally think with the lack of defensives and stuff like that, they should definitely get a bit more of an edge on other classes, but that's just my opinion. But your damage variance versus Ellie and Enhance, Enhance does have the edge, but I don't think Elemental's all that far behind. Based on my sims, it's about a 18k DPS difference between my Enhance set and my Elemental set. Although that does come down to knowing how to play Elemental as well versus knowing how to play Enhance. But I like it a lot. The single target is a bit boring. But I think that goes for a lot of single target builds because basically it's Lava Burst into Elemental Blast into Ice Fury if you need it, but then you Lava Burst again. So it's a bit less interactive and a bit less appealing, but in the AoE situations, it's a lot of fun, especially when you get all these earthquakes down and just seeing your damage ramp up, just even that little bit. Oh, it was so much fun. But on to the last boss you all knew here. This is where you see the weakness of shamans in general because of this massive damage. As you can see, I believe Hawk used a form of bubble or something there. I think he used Chi-Ji, which gives you a small shield. And then there I go down to about 30%, which is kind of crazy. And here we have the Ancient. So this is where I want to use my wall, right there. Did very little damage, thankfully. But I think Hawk also used a group defensive there as well. But this is a scary part. We did come to this guy on a 25 and fail because we just couldn't live. Especially me, I'd get knocked down to about 20% or 10% or even die entirely. Like, it's quite crazy. But you can see there, every time this happened, I was like, oh my god. It's just terrifying as a shaman. But yeah, overall we had a blast doing this key. Even though I had to play Elemental, I really did have fun. It does take a hit on my IO for Enhance, but my IO overall is pretty good. And you know, I do Mythic Plus with a lot of melee, so it is helpful that I know how to play Elemental to some extent. Here they asked if I have Ankh, and I had to check my spellbook to make sure I did, because technically that's a defensive for me, so I can respawn. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Here we get a lot of damage. I didn't have anything, thankfully. Steven there, Armand, the paladin, he used sacrifice and kept me alive, and then he used... I'm not sure if that was a no, that was lay on hands to keep me alive and not let me die, so it's pretty funny. But yeah, as a shaman, you have no defensives for Mythic Plus, so it's a real hassle, and you do have to work for it. But in my opinion, shaman's the most fun class, and it has the most fun specs as well. But anyways, that is gonna be it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you learned something, or maybe if you were interested in Elemental, this makes you want to play it too. I definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun, especially knowing how to play a ranged spec is very helpful. But yeah, that is going to be it for the plus 24 Everbloom, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Laters.